So, part two in the story of an alcoholic woman growing up, drinking alcoholically. By the time she gets to college, already drinking every day, most of the day. And this is Cathy McLeish. I'm trying to raise a little bit of awareness about alcoholism, and by telling my own story, it won't, maybe answer all the questions in your life, but it'll just give you a little bird's eye view of what one life of an alcoholic that eventually gets into recovery looks like. And if you can take a little piece of that and it works for you, that is great. Try maybe to relate to what you can and leave the rest. You don't have to take everything, for sure. I wouldn't want you to. So I am off of college. I come home for a summer, and here's what happens. I go to, in our town, we have a festival every year. It's called the Three Rivers Festival. So I go to this Three Rivers Festival. I am underage. I am drinking in the beer tent, and I'm not sure how I managed to drink as much as I did underage, but people are doing it all the time. So I'm in that beer tent, and I meet a guy, and he is there, and he's there with his son, who is probably 2 years old. Instead of me thinking, there's a guy in the beer tent with his son that's 2 years old, I'm thinking, oh, a guy in the beer tent with his son that's 2 years old. How adorable. What a neat dad. And so I'm striking up this conversation. The guy is divorced. I am immediately somehow attracted to this person with a child, thinking, I don't know, maybe he probably needs somebody to help him in his life. Now, I can't say that I was thinking at the time it was going to be me, but I definitely was aware of the situation, and I knew I had compassion for it. So down the road, I'm at a bar. My brother worked at the bar, so again, I'm in there drinking underage, and that fellow comes up to me and says, "Do you remember me?" And when he said, "From the beer tent with my child," I definitely did. And they're in two places that we meet, both having to do with alcohol, is how I met my first husband. So I don't know if that's a little red flag. I think when I went back and did some inventory work on it, it definitely was. But I met that person, I exchanged phone numbers, and I started to date that person. Again, I was only in town from college for the summer. And if I were to go back just a little bit and tell you a little bit about me as far as my self-esteem goes, I was a young girl that had carried extra weight all of her life. I wasn't, heavy, obese, but I always carried enough weight that I wasn't the first choice for dating, for proms, for any of that. So that was not a big part of my life. So when I met this guy and he gave me attention, that was very important to me. I wasn't used to that. And it, just probably set off in something in me that said, he likes me. This is something that makes me feel good. And I'm about feeling good. At that point in my life, give me a drink, get away from responsibility, let's have some fun. I'm all about feeling good. And he made me feel good. So I'm going back and forth from college now. I'm not as invested in college as I was, if I ever really was. I was one of those people that was getting A's and a few B's, but I had the potential to knock it out of the park. Not because I'm all that, but just because I had some gifts and talents. But with alcohol poured all over them, they really weren't shining. So I'm even less invested in college, going back and forth. And I make the decision after my junior year that I can probably finish college from my hometown. And alcoholics, we have these big ideas, especially when we're drinking, and then we make a decision on the big idea when we were drinking, and then our life changes, and it's never for the better. It just never is. So even when I got sober, they're like, I know you're sober, but don't make any decisions in the first year. No big decisions in the first year. And there is a reason for that, because our thinking is just distorted. Even when you take away the alcohol, our drinking is distorted. And it may be for different reasons. I mean, when I got sober, I'm like, gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. It wasn't about trying to get out of everything, but it was inflated, So anyways, I come back from college, and I get an apartment, in a year we're married, and in my mind, in my alcoholic mind, I'm looking at this man that has 2 kids, and I am going to save him and his children. Their mom was not around. She was out of state, and so we had full custody of them. And when I married at 22, I was an instant mom. And so, I had grown up in a family. I had babysat all the time. I just thought I had a heart for this and I could do it. And that wasn't the truth at all. And a huge, huge part of that was my drinking. And so I had drank alcoholically. He played in a band, before I was even 21. I was drinking in all of these atmospheres as much as I wanted every weekend, and then when I was back at college, I was doing the same. So the year before we got married, I'm living in town. I start going to college and then I bail. I think I did that 3 times. And I never really understood that alcohol had a big part to do with it. But if you have continued failures in areas where you think you should have what it takes to succeed, alcohol might be the problem. I don't know. It never dawned on me until in hindsight. So anyways, I marry this man, and I'm resentful. And why am I resentful? I'm resentful because my playtime totally disappeared and I became a mom instantly. I'm resentful because I am a selfish, self-centered person who wants to do what I want to do with my life. I don't verbalize that, but that is exactly how I'm acting. And everybody else is getting in the way. And these 2 beautiful boys that had no malice. I mean, they were just there trying to live life, trying to enjoy life. And I'm resentful because they're kids and they need stuff from me. And they need more from me than what they can give to me. And isn't that a sad state of affairs? Because I'm going to make them miserable. And it wasn't super intentional. It just wasn't. But did it happen? Yes. It showed up in my actions quite often. Now, I went through the motions of doing a lot of good mom things. And when, they grew up and I made different amends to them and we talked about stuff, they were very appreciative of the good that I did. In fact, because they were so loving, they could look more at the good that I did than the damage that I did. But I remember incidences, I remember situations, I remember moments of pain that I caused intentionally because I was full of pain. And when you're full of pain, when your life is not going the way that you want it, you are not going to be able to pull anything great from that well and give it out to people. I was, doing more harm than I was good at that point in my life. And so our alcoholic drinking escalated. It escalated to the point that police could come to our home. Other people knew what was going on. We were isolated from a lot of our family members because, we had either damaged relationships or they were just not, doing and living the same, thank goodness, living the same way we were. And so they moved to the outskirts of our lives. And so those were years of just selfishness and self-centeredness, focusing on the alcohol, spending so much money on alcohol, whether it was the alcohol itself or the consequences of the drinking. It's not in the budget to get mad at your spouse and go spend 2 nights in a hotel. That wasn't in our small family budget. So anyways, we, go on like this. I have 2 more beautiful children, 2 daughters we have together that I think are going to make everything better. I love girls, and it was just like, this is going to make it all balance out. And still, I was still that person that resented all the responsibility in my life. When I look back, it was as simple as this. Everything that was supposed to be a blessing, that was meant to be a blessing, was a burden to the alcoholic, to this alcoholic. Everything, all of the beauty in my life was a burden. The children, the family, the house, everything that I would say today, thank you for these gifts. Thank you for these people. Thank you for these relationships. It was all too much. It was a bother, and it was a burden. And so we come to this, point where we can't go on drinking, and neither of us want to get sober, but there were people in our lives really pulling for us to get sober. And I got help because my ego told me that this person that wanted me to get help really needed me to go get help so that they could feel good about themselves. You might have to replay that for it to make any sense, but don't bother because it won't make any sense. But that was my thinking. They need me. And all the time they were like, oh my gosh, this couple needs so much help and these kids are drowning in their alcohol. So anyways, I go and I get help. I get help, and because I really kind of want to save my children from what is going on, that is the little piece that helps me to do what I could not do on my own. I care enough about my kids to do something. That was probably the last thing I had left because I didn't care about myself. I certainly didn't care about him. And I wanted him to be the one that stepped up and did the change so that I could just drink like a normal drinker. And drinking like a normal drinker is, this thing out there that you're never going to get a hold of again if you're drinking every day, if you're binging when you don't want to binge, if you are starting to drink and you cannot stop, if you continue to have the same bad situations happen, even though you try this, that, and some other way to make a different outcome happen. So I was never going to be a normal drinker. And I didn't know that. But thank goodness that I put down a drink and I continued to surround myself with people that were succeeding to not drink one day at a time. And that was the beginning of the change for me. That was the beginning of me seeing the truth about the way that I was living. Because when I was just saturated in the drama and the chaos, in the anger, in the pain, in the alcohol, in the responsibility that I could not handle, I could not see the truth about my part in everything. And when I was able to put down that drink, the clouds started to lift very slowly. A lot of people would have said, oh my gosh, she's been sober for this long and that's all she can see about the truth in her life. And that would have been very true because that was the truth for me. I was a very slow learner. I don't know whether it was because it was, I was with an alcoholic and it all got, kind of messed up and as who was responsible for what. But it took me so long to see the truth about my life. And the best thing that I did is just not go back to drinking because I had a chance. I had a chance at things getting better. And honestly, things got better really quickly. They did. Now, I had a lot to face because I had hidden so much of my drinking that most people in my life thought that my ex was the problem. And he was part of the problem. He truly was because we were two crazy alcoholics living together. But he was only a part of the problem. I, in my dishonesty, in my denial, in my hiding, I was a huge part of the problem. And that is what began to change. But a lot of people felt duped with my dishonesty. I mean, it's like, even I didn't know I was being as dishonest as I was. It was like I was hiding my alcoholism from myself as well as from anybody else. But I had to deal with the fact that most of the people that were closest to me felt like I had betrayed them, betrayed their trust, their confidence. And it was true, I had, even if it wasn't totally intentional. So I had a lot to work my way back from, an awful lot that I had to unpack. But the good news is I wasn't going to continuously keep piling on. I wasn't going to continue to make all these bad choices. I was running things by other people besides myself, and I was getting better answers to my problems, to my choices, and things were looking up. Now, we didn't make it. We did separate and we divorced. And that was probably, I don't know what could have happened. You can't replay life and do it over again. You don't get do-overs. But at the time, getting out of that situation was probably the best thing that could happen for our children. And it was very sad. And, the boys went with their father and the girls stayed with me. But doing that, even though it was the hardest choice, gave them the best chance, because together there was so much damage and there was so much that needed to be worked out and worked through, that them sitting around waiting for us to get healthy, to get happy, to get our lives back in order, they would have been grown out and on their own, and it wouldn't have been a healthy next 10 years. So life isn't, what I had hoped it would be when I got sober. I mean, it was, but I couldn't fix everything. And in hindsight, looking back, I can say that it was fixed as it was meant to be fixed. My children did suffer. They did suffer, but there is a lot of their challenges that have made them stronger people. Now, I'm not saying that for anybody to stay drinking so that they can challenge their children to be better, stronger people. That is not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying what they went through, when they dealt with it in a positive way, they became stronger people. And everyone, my stepsons, my daughters, everyone is a stronger, better person than I am. And I don't say that to put myself down. I'm just saying that because they have made great choices. They have done great work on themselves, and they have come out on the other side of what happened to them when they were younger, and they're shining. And there is hope for that too. But it doesn't happen by the alcoholic doing nothing. It happens when we choose to make a change, when we choose to get humble enough, just that little bit of humility that says, I can't do it. I can't do it on my own. I don't know how to do it on my own. So that is the second part of my story. The third part is just going to be all of the revelations that came with being sober and what life looked like for me going forward. And I hope you come back. I hope you subscribe, and we can share a little bit of that wisdom through experience and break through a little bit of the ignorance of not understanding what a recovering alcoholic life could look like, should look like, can look like for any of us if we choose to just ask for help. Thanks. Cathy McLeish.